Microphones and megapixels. What on earth do I mean? Well, I'm hoping that this video might help some of you understand kind of audio visually. Really, it's going to be the difference between the frequency shape of a mic and, if you like, its underlying definition, resolution. Now, on New Year's Eve, I got a late gig coming, which is very nice. And I went and did it with my friend, and I have this camera here that I bought for gigs, for social media. The idea being, it's a nice point and shoot. It's a bit better than a phone. Well, it is, but we'll see in a minute. And the idea is I switch the thing on, set it up on auto, say to somebody in the audience or a friend that's there, would you mind having a photo? No. I can do a selfie thing with the screen as well. That was the idea. Give it to people. Hopefully they don't run off. And I can get some better photos for my social media and just generally. That's the idea. It's had good reviews. You know, really. You're talking about microphones, I'm going to tell you cameras as well. You don't know until you get it. Phones as well. Anyway, such as it is, 20 megapixels. When I got back, went through the photos. Of course, you've got to go through them then, haven't you? You know, you're not finished looking at them. And I chose one. I thought it was quite interesting, quite fun. And I edited it a bit. First of all, I did framing, cropping. And then levels. So levels now, I don't know if you know anything about this, but it kind of, you can alter the amount of shadow content, how deep it is. You can alter the highlight, the white areas, bring them down a bit or take them up. And you can you can do loads more, but I just do the basic thing. You can do something with the midtones as well to get a balance which you think is natural or advantageous. The next thing you might do is sharpen. As far as I understand it, sharpening sees like between the bright of my hand here and this, which is darker, and it accentuates that contrast between light and dark, so it tends to make things pop. I'm going to put this on the screen and then tell you what I notice. So here are the photos. This particular photo coming up with the 3 phases of editing. Now maybe if you look at them you can see no adjustment, and then I altered the shadows and the highlights, and then with those shadows and highlights altered, I then added some sharpening. So if you look, I know it's difficult on your own computer screen, but my friend preferred the bass and treble boost immediately. She said, oh yes, it looks brighter, it looks sharper, it looks more punchy. That's what she liked it, so we used that one. But what do I notice? Well, something to remember is that the basic resolution isn't changed at all. It's the same image. I've just altered, if you know, the treble and the bass, if you will. But the resolution is the same. If I zoom into them, which you can't do so easily, I notice that in my white shirt, actually, I think it's about right with no adjustment. I think that's probably pretty much how it was. If I look at the one with the bass and treble, I can see that some of the detail in the white shirt has gone because I've accentuated the brightness and it spreads over into the areas which are not quite as bright, but it brightens those too. And so therefore the definition is concealed, shall I say. And if I move over to the one with the boost, with the sizzle as well, then I can see even more detail is not apparent. The other place I look at is the eyes. If I look at the eyes, the no adjustment is okay. Bass and treble, the eyes are still okay. They're perhaps a bit punchier. Remember, there's no more detail though. And when I add the sizzle, they're a bit unnatural. Particularly if you zoom in, it looks a bit weird. So I'm kind of relating that to microphones that have different shapes to them. And the ones I've chosen maybe to kind of illustrate that a bit are these. the SR40V, Beyerdynamic M88 and the Shure 58 beta. So if I move across as best I can, this is what the SR40V sounds like. And if I add a bit of treble to it, I'm going to add a bit of treble to it now. I'm adding some treble. Is that punchier? Is that better? Do you prefer that? I don't know. The thing is, I've noticed, I'm going to add some mid as well. Excuse my pots, I've got to go through the whole lot. The gain pots are okay now since I sprayed them, but there's all these others. Anyway, I'm going to add some bass as well. There's some bass coming on full. Too much, is it? So there, I've got this now. What do you think? Is that more exciting? Is that more exciting? But let me get rid of it and make it flat. Going back to flat. Is this now unexciting? You see, we get very used to visually and audio-wise, certain things, and when they're gone, you think, oh. What I've noticed, which I've said before, moving on to the Beyerdynamic M88, what I've noticed, as I said before, is that if you don't have that shape, you don't have that bass and treble and that sharpening, then often the mic can afford to be louder because those peaks don't push through. The other thing is, I've noticed that it's easier to EQ, because if you've got a helter-skelter treble, then the width that you're boosting it, they've got a certain Q, a certain width. And if you've got one of those spikes within there, when you boost it, that spike's going to go way through there. But if you've got a nice flat mic, then that curve that you're boosting will be gentler, and you're less likely to have not only feedback, but unpleasant overtones, if you like. So this one, you can hear, it's got a bit of that. We know that's got quite a broad, gentle lift. Let me go back to the SR40V. Back on the SR40V, which doesn't have that lift. Back on the SR40V, which doesn't have that lift. Well, not really, not much. Going back to the M88, and the M88 up there has it, but it's not it's not offensive, I don't think. Moving on to the Shure Beta 58. So this, as you can tell, it's got that already. What happens if I try and give a bit more to it there? Try and give a bit more to it there. There we go. I'm going to boost the bass as well. So this one to me now sounds like that over-sharpened picture. It's like, man, no. So let me put it back to flat. Here we are back at flat, and I'll just go through them again so that you can hear that you're familiar with these, perhaps if you've been listening to the channel for a while. So I'm going back. So this to me, it's got that bass and treble boost and some sharpening, other distortion and whatever going on, and they're not the same resolution either. I'm going to get onto that later. This is now on the M88, which has less of that sharpening. You can hear it's smoother on those top ones up there. So it's got a bit of that bass. You can hear it's waiting the whole time. Could take it away a bit maybe, and you can hear there's a little bit of accentuation there. Now I'm on the SR40V, which actually to me, always when I come to the SR40V, I hear, something around about there wants to push. Doesn't really show on the graph. And onto the Ethos. Now I'm on the Ethos, which you can hear probably has less of something than the SR40V. Back to the 40V. On the SR40V, which is a bit louder, I think, so I can take it down a bit. The SR40V, the SR40V, the SR40V, not the SR40V, not the SR. There's something up there, isn't there? So the SR40V, though it does go higher than this one, but it's not there because I can't hear up there. Yeah, I must look at the SR40V graph again because there does seem to be a little bit of something going on at the top there. Whilst we're on the Ethos, see how that handles. I'm going to boost the treble a bit. This is boosting the treble on the Ethos, which it can take quite nicely. There's a treble boosted on the Ethos. I'm going to boost the middle, which is 2.5. The treble's 12. And I'm going to boost the bass as well. There we go. So now we've got a little bit of that levels adjustment of treble and bass. And you get used to it. Maybe you like that. Maybe you like that. Maybe you like that. I'm going to put it flat in a minute. Maybe you like that. Maybe you like that going flat. Maybe you like that. Does it now sound dull? But after a while, you find, I do anyway, it sounds natural. I'm going to move on now to resolution, detail, definition. And it occurred to me, let me continue with the photographs. So, over there I've got my Beyerdynamic M500 set up above a mixing desk, blah. And I thought, let me take some photographs from the same place on a tripod and with a self-timer as best I can, not so much on the phone. I held it really still, but I rested it on the tripod. The others were on the tripod with the self-timer, so the shutter eliminate any movement which might blur things a bit. So I've got my rather old phone. I must do something about it. Which is, actually, I've got to say, for general things, looking at comparing, which I'm going to do in a minute, I thought, not so bad. For an old, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, I don't know. So it's 16 megapixels, so they say, with the fixed, whatever the lens is. This is 20 megapixels with a zoom lens, meant to be a good lens. I set it at 28mm equivalent. 20 megapixels. This is 36 megapixels. Very nice sensor with a 1975, they call it the Hollywood. It's quite rare actually, 1975 f2 28mm lens, so the same as that one was set up, trying to get the, the angle of view the same, manual focus and everything, so I took my time and sorted it all out. I'm going to look at some pictures here then and see what you notice. I hope I remember to say later that, of course, these mics we were talking about go into a mixer and a PA, or should I say a PA, the whole thing combined, which, if you like, is like the monitor you're viewing the pictures on. So what's the resolution of that? Because it'll blow away resolution this end. If you haven't got it that end, I'm not criticising anyway, but let's go to the PA then. You've got a posh mic, and your PA, or the PA, the other people had a New Year's Eve. Oh, please. But spend a bit. Spend a bit. You don't have to spend a lot, but please. Just blow away any advantages. In the vinyl days, I've still got my player over there, but I don't use it. It'd be nice. But I remember, I always liked good speakers because they seemed to me to make the most difference. If everything else was okay, they had the most effect, it seemed to me, the speakers on the sound. They're the thing that's driving the air in the room. Of course, the room will affect it too, and how they match with the room, all that. But I remember in the hi-fi circles, I'm saying you should spend most of your money on the cartridge, the next on the amplifier, and then the speakers. The idea being that if you don't get the detail in, nothing can be done further down. That was their idea, but I found it more enjoyable for me listening to have better speakers if the cartridge, the deck, and the amplifier were okay. It was more enjoyable because otherwise I'd be left with tiny little speakers with no bass, and even if all the details there, their idea was that you'd then upgrade later in that order. So I can see the logic behind that, and I can see the logic if you don't have a good mic, if you've got a shaped mic, then you've got to start fiddling about trying to get rid of the shape if it doesn't suit you. Whereas if you've got a flat mic, most desks have got 3-band, if not more, if not swept mids, that give you some chance, and you're less likely to get those peaks as well. And then you've got the detail too. If you don't like the detail, I'm sure you can get a processor which will get rid of it. Can't see why you wouldn't, but maybe you don't. But you can always get rid of it. So the understanding then is, if you can capture it all at the beginning, then you're in with a chance. And you can reduce. If what you capture is coarse and shaped, you've got a battle on your hands. You're not going to get, if it's coarse, if you haven't got the definition, you're not going to get it back later. And then you have to fiddle about trying to get rid of the nasty, or whatever it's got. So, looking at this then. Really, I'm zooming in a bit. At first glance, not really that much difference. 16, 20, 36. Well, certainly between the 16 and 36, when I zoom in, I do see a slight difference when I zoom in on the actual grill, which is quite fine. But that's what I'm saying, just for roundabout shooting the phone is pretty good. and so convenient. So, you know. The next one, then, I zoom in a bit more. So now they've captured their resolution, and what I'm doing now is digging into it. So the files aren't changing, but obviously the resolution is less because I'm going to smaller and smaller parts of the frame. So on the next one, I'm looking again, zooming in a bit, and I'm thinking holding up pretty well, all of them. Okay. I'm not finished. Going in a bit more. Yes, so now I start to see the 16 struggling a bit. 20 maybe a bit. Seems to me 36 is holding up pretty well. Okay, in again. What do I see now? The 16, yeah, it's starting to get blurry. And you can see right down the bottom, there's the end of the Beyerdynamic with the 3 bands. It's having a job with those a bit. They're a bit dirty. Better on the 20. And better still on the 36. Very good on the 36. Also, if you look at the band, the black band round the edge, I don't know if you can see on your screen, but the detail on the 16, maybe it's because it's losing focus, but don't think so much that the detail isn't really there. All those fine little marks. And there's a sort of texture. And it holds up better on the 20 and even better on the 36. Let's go further. Okay. Now this really is quite impressive, because if you go back and look at that first photograph, and now look how far we've gone in. You're going to start getting pixels. You've got to, surely. And indeed you are. So the 16 now has kind of had it, but you've gone in a long way. The 20, no, it's okay, not so good. I noticed it's got some purple fringing and a bit of green fringing there. So it's a modern lens where I thought they'd have corrected that. That's one of the things that has changed over the years. But lo and behold, we look at the 1975 lens. And what you can see when you zoom in there, I don't know if you can see on your screen, on the 36 megapixel with a good lens, you can see the foam underneath, the kind of charcoal, dark, almost black foam through the grill. You can get a sense of that on the 20 megapixel. It's not so, yeah. And on the 16 megapixel, no. I'm hoping then that gives an idea of the resolution of a mic. How much detail, how much is it able to pick up? Particularly I found in this area, as you probably know by now for me, there I find a kind of freedom if it's a higher resolution. And you can't get that back. Can't get it back. You can't get it if down the chain if it hasn't been captured by the mic. Then you've got your high resolution. If it's flat as well, then you can do what you want with it. If you can't be doing with all that, here's the high resolution mic. If you can't be doing with all that, then, well, there's nothing to be doing with really. You've got more, I think, to be doing with if you haven't got it, the high resolution. Going to move on then to the M88. Just to give you another listen at that. Let me see. So say I didn't like that. I mean, that is a colour. That's the levels, if you like, being adjusted a bit by the mic itself. So now I've got to do something. So I might take it down there a bit. Now, what about that? What about that? What about that? And actually, difficult on the M88 in some ways to take the top off because it's quite a broad thing up there, and this is 12K, so I kind of need a swept thing with a Q maybe, but let me just see. I'm going to try the middle first, actually. Here's the middle coming off a bit. There's the middle, so that's 2, but then it leaves, can you hear? That comes back a bit, so I'm going to put the middle back to flat. I'm going to take a little bit of the 12K off. There's a little bit of the 12K. There's a little bit of the 12K off. Okay, so I can cut that a bit. I can cut it to that sub M88 with a bit of bass off and a bit of treble off, and I'm just going to put it back to flat now. And there's the M88 back to flat. Finally, seeing if I can do something with the Shure. See, it's that. Let me just try the middle. Shure. So I'm going to take a little bit of that. I mean, it's too low, really. All right, leave the middle flat, taking some of the top off. There, it's all off. Bring it back a bit. So that's the kind of the shaping. I'm going to put it back to flat. And as you know, this. So what you're looking for, listening for, is can you see that foam, as it was in the photograph? Can you hear it through, and the grill? Is there enough detail to be able to catch that subtle, oh yeah, there's foam underneath that grill. So here it comes. Sorry about the breath. I'll try and be M88. More definition, I feel. SR40V. Just feels expansive. And ethos, why not? Now. Could be me. Could be me. But that thick wedge of foam, what do you imagine it does? Stops the pops. But what else? I think just clouds a little bit that area. Just clouds it a bit. This one not so. It's got foam as well, so nice. I haven't tried it without the foam. We have to take things. It'll be interesting. And this has a small diaphragm. Well, this has a small one for condensers, really, compared to most of the other condensers mics you'll see. But it's larger than this. So maybe this is just that more able to do its thing. I think that's quite enough of all this, and I just repeat before I go that obviously then the rest of the chain, I'm talking about that kind of, you've got to have speakers. Amps I've found are not such a issue these days. They're pretty good, I think, in preamps and stuff. But the speakers, it's the ones that the transducers seem to be, obviously you've got to, from a physical into an electric signal, wow. It's got to be physical, mechanical, along with the electronic. And you come to the speakers and they're electronic, if you like, in a simplish kind of way. Well, they are electromagnetic, I believe. But they've got to be able to transduce, they've got to be able to change that into the physical sound, physically with the air. So I've always found that they're the, for me, that's kind of where I'd spend the money, I think, if I were to revise what was advised earlier. Enough. Keep well. I'll see you next time. I'm still here. One more thing. Just for completeness, may as well. On my notes I have, after all that, it's true, after all that, my notes, it says, do you really care? Well, it's an important question, really, is it? Do you really care? Because if, well, maybe not. I've got a note here. I've had compliments about the sound quality many times, because I've got good PAs as well. I've had many times. I said, which is a bit strange at a gig, which it is, really. I've got to say nice music. Oh, yeah. I say good sound several times. One studio engineer came and said, wow, your system sounds like a big hi-fi. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that started, well, that one, he was talking about 2 pairs of Bose 802s with the Bose power amp and blah, blah, blah. Yes. I know people say, I hear no highs, I feel no lows. It sounds like must be Bose. I don't think they're using a weak amp. No. And also sometimes trying to get away without the equalizer. No. The reason I got the Bose was because I remember in the 70s, 80s, hearing Francis Campbell in Brixton and thinking, I wasn't into singing. I wasn't singing at the time, I was a guitarist. I was watching the guitar most, but thinking, wow, those vocals sound big hi-fi. So I do care, and people do notice if you're into that kind of thing. Probably, you know, it's a heavy rock. Maybe not so much. I don't know. Anyway, that really is it this time. Keep well.